Hi everyone, I'm Ben, your host at Spinning Community Podcast, and here we are trying to focus on how we can use transferable skills, intercultural competency, as well as future literacy and future thinking to improve the things we are doing and to cope with the challenges professionally or even personally. And today I want to talk with my guest in episode 7. In fact, last year at the same time, almost, I joined a gathering, and that was one of the first moments I've heard about future literacy. And I didn't expect, but I've had lots of great experiences in terms of that specific concept. Now we already incorporated that concept in our activities at Benno Community. So I prefer to say nothing about my guest and ask her to introduce herself and say what are the main areas she's focusing on and why she thinks I decided and I tried a lot to invite her to join me to talk about some insights and experiences she already had.
Thank you very much. Well, hi everyone. My name is Francesca Ballini. I am the guest for today in Ben's podcast. What can I tell you about myself? So I have a background in international communications from the same masters that Ben is following. And specifically, I pivoted a little bit towards futures literacy, as you mentioned, and future thinking, and sustainability. So after my master's, I did a bit of a few jobs up until now, and one of which was an intercultural trainer for students and for professionals. I wrote my master's thesis on futures literacy, and now I work as a sustainability in a sustainability team of a company in Amsterdam.
Uh, Great. And let's ask about your main motivation. What inspired you to work in these areas like sustainability, intercultural communication, and also future literacy?
Well, I would say, first of all, curiosity. I'm a pretty curious person. So when I'm exposed to a conversation that talks about something that I find interesting, then my focus shifts and goes to that. And I need to know more. So that's, for example, futures literacy, how it entered my life was simply because somebody who's leading the master's program I was in decided to offer the opportunity to do a 1 week course on this topic. And I, as part of that group, um, this caught my interest and therefore it became part of my life. Same thing with sustainability. As a communications professional, I started in sustainability, and that caught my attention. And then now I work in sustainability specifically. And I think definitely curiosity, but also in general, the idea of impact, which I think it's not a very unique thing, but right. But I would say at the beginning, it started by intercultural communication, international communication, as having an impact on people's lives and students. Right? How can I help you make it better, make this experience better? And then it evolved into sustainability, where it's a bit of a broader level at a broader scale. How can I help my company have a more positive impact, environmentally and socially?
Fabulous. Francesca, you lived in different countries as well as I know,
Yeah,
right?
multiple.
So, and you engaged in some specific cultures such as intercultural, international communication, and future literacy, based on my understanding, which is about focusing on some more specific areas. We will talk later more. And my question is, what challenges did you face when you adapting to new cultures and how did you overcome them? Because now also you are working in the Netherlands, in professional setting, and still, I think you are coping with some challenges or some nice experiences in terms of working in a kind of diverse
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Well, who is it? I mean, no, okay, yes, great question. Different challenges. I would say one of the first places where I lived, when I moved away from Italy at the beginning was China. And the biggest challenge there was obviously the language, right? So, because I was studying, so I was staying in a student environment, so I wasn't exposed to the culture directly as much, but the language was there. Like nobody spoke anything but Chinese, even within the campus, the shops that were there. And I can tell you, for example, we would shop in this small shop just outside our building, and for the first couple of months me and my roommate have used for our hair products for our hair that were not where what they were supposed to be. So we thought that we were buying shampoo and conditioner. We did not buy shampoo and conditioner. That's Let's just leave it at that. So all these little things that you start those at the beginning were I think the biggest ones. Which was different from the Netherlands because in the Netherlands, for example, when I moved here, everybody speaks English and understands English at least where I lived specifically and my English is good enough, let's say, to not have these problems with language. So, language is one issue somewhere. In other places, culture, as in behaviors, more than anything, was the biggest challenge. For example, for anybody who lives in the Netherlands knows that the Dutchies can be quite direct, right? And the way I was raised was actually to not be direct ever. So for me, to come into a culture where everybody would just tell you what they think straight away, and I did not know how to answer. Like in so many moments in my life in the Netherlands, I found myself having to respond to somebody, I do not know what to say right now. And I am not usually speechless. So, I would say different challenges, at different times. How I overcame them, I think the first and main point is to give yourself time and grace, right? So you are going through a change when you're moving somewhere else, and that is always difficult. You really have to face the fact that the world doesn't revolve around your culture, your way of thinking. Like this is what I love the most about moving abroad. Like it really is about having to adapt to something else. You are smaller than whatever else is around you because you are one person into a culture of thousands of people, right? So it really does make you come to terms with the fact that you have to fail. People will laugh at you. You will be misunderstood. So you're kind of you starting from, let's say, defect level compared to others, right? A lower level. So that for sure, giving yourself the time to learn and the space to learn and the space to fail is really important. And I refer to this also from a professional standpoint. In a university, for example, the way people study in Italy, so the exams that you do in Italy, what I was used to, was very different. The way they would do essays, where I studied in the UK or in the Netherlands, for example. My first essay I brutally failed because I had, no idea how to write an essay, and I had to learn very quickly how to do that. And it teaches you resilience, but at the same time, you have to be okay with retaking a class because in the end of the day, I failed, right? But also professionally, when you get into a different culture, you will fail into stakeholder engagement because they are used to something different, right? They're used to a certain type of communication. They expect a certain type of communication that you don't have. You will be, most probably, and again, I'm coming from a place of joining a culture that is, in my case, Dutch, but I also, right now I'm lucky enough to work in a place that is very international. So I have slightly different challenges.
Right.
But I could say a lot of people will come and start working in a Dutch environment, which happened to me as well. And yeah, I think the expectations is that, of course, as an expat, you're not expected to know everything as they do, or speak the languages they do, or communicate the same way they do. But unconsciously, some things are expected. And I can give you an example. One thing that is very different culturally in a work environment for me, where I come from, if you're an intern or you just joined, you don't necessarily have an opinion. Most of the time, you're absorbing. You're expected to observe at the beginning. And in general, if somebody at a very, it's quite hierarchical. So if somebody that is way higher than you in the company comes to you and or comes in a meeting and asks for an opinion, you're not necessarily the one who's going to raise your hand. Probably your manager or somebody else will do that, right? Here, everybody's expected to have an opinion.
Exactly.
Everybody, and if you don't, it's actually seen as a weakness rather than a strength. So, I had to learn very quickly that I had to raise my voice. It was actually expected of me to have an opinion every single time, which put like, at the beginning, it felt very uncomfortable because I was not secure enough, I was very insecure about going in front of a bunch of professionals, me as an intern, for example, having to say, "I think this." But it was so it is a big challenge, for anybody who moves abroad, I think.
Great. I wanted to ask some more extra questions. You already answered them. I wanted to ask about, for example, the challenges usually maybe international students in a new setting or new country face. You already said something. And also about the Dutch culture, you mentioned some main points, and also about any kind of culture shock. You mentioned something, but if you have anything else related to these
Yeah.
specific topics, I'm more than happy to hear. If not, I can jump to the next question I want to ask.
Honestly, one thing about culture shock, for 2 things actually. So one is it is very, very often overlooked. People don't really think about it, especially students, because maybe sometimes you do an exchange and you move for a certain time, right? And it's a fixed time. So you already know you're gonna go home after that. And it is very underestimated because it can be nothing. It's true. It can be nothing, but it can also be very bad. A lot of people get affected a lot physically and mentally by it. So I would not underestimate it. That's one advice. And the other thing is that there is no way to bypass it. The only way that you can do that is time. So if you are in a bad place, always remind yourself that it's a set period of time. Like, it's not gonna be forever. It's not gonna last forever itself, even if you have to stay in a place. But if give yourself the benefit of the choice in saying, "Okay, I'm here for this amount of time," or if things go too bad, I can always find ways to make myself feel better. Treat yourself a bit more if that's what you need to do. So really, really take care of yourself. And then surround yourself with people that will bring you joy. And this means different things because different things for different people, right? And one of the advices that you hear a lot from like books and things is, oh, go out, explore. Well, maybe that's joy for somebody, but not for somebody else, right? Sometimes joy is also finding people that you can just game with, and that's fine too. So, yeah, that is, I would say, what I really what I really think everybody should know about culture shock.
Great, thank you. And well, we know that living, working, or studying in foreign countries could be overwhelming. I mean, for example, living, working, and studying in the Netherlands for people who are coming from other countries or different cultures. I have experienced something the same as well. And it's kind of different approach towards the challenges or different, skills or abilities or things like that. My question is if you want to mention some main skills or abilities as well as maybe at the same time some opportunities for some kind of personal and professional development. I want to ask you to share something related to these skills as well as those opportunities.
Um, well, skills, I would say resilience, which sounds very fancy and, it's very trendy at the moment, but it is true. Like, you have to be able to adapt and you will. So, it's not something that you can when you're planning to move somewhere, you don't know how it's gonna go. You don't know how you're gonna react, but you have to trust yourself that you will react to the best of your abilities in the best way. So I find that, for example, if you're scared about moving somewhere for any reason, if you're a student, if you're professionally moving, or you're following a partner or a family move, anything that is, and you're scared about how you'll react if you're gonna be alone or just a couple of people, go on a solo trip, even just for like 3 days, outside of your house, outside of your city, somewhere that you don't know, might be a village just outside your town, like whatever it is, but it really helps making you understand what does it mean to be alone for a few days and get comfortable with that because it's gonna, that's what's gonna happen. And that what that builds is that confidence in yourself that no matter what, you'll be able to take care of yourself. And the reason why I'm saying, like, it's not something you can plan about, like, you can plan around because you don't know it until you find yourself in a situation. For example, very crazy example, but, my mom I grew up in a very Italian household, and my mom is one of those sweet people that just do all the chores herself and does not wanna burden the kids, right? So, I had the moment I moved to China, I was 21, I had never really done a laundry load by myself, never. So, I go to China and I had to learn how to do it, and all the instructions were in Chinese. The people working there were Chinese, speaking Chinese, not really English. So it was me, myself, pretty much trying to read whatever I could read or, and I know that now there is Google Translate and all that, but in 2015, it wasn't that easy because you had to go to China and your phone wasn't that your phone plan wouldn't allow you to go on Google because Google is not allowed there. So you had to get a VPN, but all these things take time. So the first week that you have to make it, that you actually have to wash your clothes, you don't have all those things. So, yeah, and I ruined a bunch of clothes a bunch of times at the beginning. And that is something that it scared me so much at the beginning. It really, really scared me because I know I didn't know what to do, and I was a student, so it's not like I could just go and buy something for myself that easily. Like I had to make it work, and it was, it's a challenge. It always is, and you really have to get comfortable with that yourself. So resilience and confidence, I think, are the most important things. Of course, once you get acquainted a little bit with where you are and you see honestly, it doesn't matter if you're planning to stay there long term or short term, but if you want to really understand the culture, better integrate, learning the language is key no matter where you go. The Netherlands is a very good example. Everybody speaks English here. Everybody understands English to a level of need. Maybe they don't speak perfectly, but you can always have a conversation, especially on things that you need. But you're never gonna integrate unless you really understand the culture and learn the language. So, that is something that I always suggest and advise. Like if you feel like you want to integrate more or you feel lonely, you wanna meet more people, which happens a lot to people who move abroad by themselves or as a couple, that is a very good way to do so. So, go to a course, learn language. And this was the first part of your questions about skills and capabilities.
The opportunities, because the point is, I'm just trying to find a connection between this part, which is mostly related to insights for international students and the things like that, and building the career path as well, which is how to start the journey in the job market. Because, young people are struggling a lot in terms of specifically the international students or the people who want to work in different setting, different country. Because of those things you mentioned, they feel they cannot, engage in a right way in the job market or communicating with people. And it seems it's kind of weakness.
Yeah.
But at the same time, what I understand from the things you already mentioned, it could be kind of opportunity to learn, to explore some different point of views. My question is, those intercultural experiences you mentioned, how they can help them to find more opportunities or even create more opportunities for themselves?
I would say that there's different ways in which you can, as you said, see a challenge. A challenge can be a challenge, and a challenge can be an opportunity, right? It can be a better or a good thing. So first of all, I would say when you move somewhere, think about it in the positive way. So any challenge that you face, from big ones to small ones. So even going to the supermarket and buying the food that you actually want to buy and not messing it up, it's a challenge, and it can feel like a huge challenge. Always take it as an opportunity. So that mentality is absolutely key. What are the opportunities? Well, it kind of depends on where you are. There are some places, for example, the Netherlands, where opportunities are more than challenges most of the times, because there are a lot and a lot and a lot of expats. There's really a big community, international community in this country. So you don't have to be alone if you don't want to. There's usually a way, and you can find help. People are mostly willing to help most of the time. So for example, I moved here when I moved here and I studied here in the Netherlands. During COVID, I moved back to Italy for family reasons. And then after a couple of years, I found a job back in Amsterdam. So I moved back for a job, and I moved back as an adult. So I didn't move as a student where you have university resources, you have other students in the university. So it's kind of easier to get to know. You can engage in sports with the university. You can do classes outside of, like, within the student community. The housing, it's usually through or with other students. There's definitely more opportunities. And this is also in general in Europe, this is kind of the vibe that you get, right? But as a professional, when you move somewhere, it's not the same. You're alone a lot of times. So, for example, I had to take back my volleyball skills, bring back my volleyball skills, and join a club to meet people and to have some fun and not think about work all the time. And it was really hard for me because I hadn't played volleyball in many years. It brought back some mixed feelings and memories that I wasn't necessarily, when you close a chapter of your life, you're like, let's close, it's done, it's there, I've done it, done. But actually, I had to, start playing again, which I didn't necessarily want to do at the beginning. I had to force myself a bit and put myself out there. We did a lot of yoga classes, and I'm not a yoga person, like these kind of things. You really have to put yourself out there. And I feel like in a lot of countries, it's true. When you have to put yourself out there much more. One of my biggest fears in life have always been networking events. Networking as a student, as a professional, any type of networking. So events where you go by yourself or with a friend, and then you have to start engaging with other people out of nowhere. I do not possess those skills or that confidence at all. At the same time, I had to do it. Like, I had to learn how to do it because I wanted to meet people and engage with people and, yeah, just integrate a bit more into the work culture of this country or that country or whatever it is. So definitely, as opportunities, I would say always look for classes, sports, hobbies, join hobbies clubs, these kind of opportunities to integrate better where you are and feel less lonely. Because honestly, I'm very attached to my family. I'm very attached to my culture. So I am not somebody who sees myself, I don't see myself forever abroad. But at the same time, I had to learn to let go of a part of that and, make a new family wherever I am. And as you said, I've lived in multiple places, and I've always been able to do it, not because I'm magical or because I'm amazing, but literally just because I would force myself. And sometimes force myself meant crying that I didn't want to go, but literally push myself. And even if I would meet some one person um, out of the whole group, and that would bring to one coffee chat in a month, that was a win. Yeah, so I think those are the kind of things that you really need to reframe your mindset as an opportunity. And I love that Futures Literacy kind of taught me that too, because what it does, it really is a way of reframe. It's a skill that reframes your mindset and a way of making you more aware of opportunities rather than challenges, and opens your mind to be more resilient, right? And that is key whenever you're in an intercultural or international.
Right. I like the way we are talking because, whenever I want, okay, it's time to ask that specific question, you already answer. So, exactly, I just wanted to ask you because after the things you talked about, I thought maybe it's time to talk a little bit more about future literacy because first time I met you, you talked about future literacy, and I know you engaged a lot in that specific topic. And if it's fine, you already mentioned about future literacy and how it could be important for people. But let's talk a little bit in detail about the future literacy. What is it exactly? I mean, if you want to explain, I mean, as much as possible, simple and easy.
Good question. So what is it? It's a skill. It's a capability. And it's a way of integrating the future into our daily life or behavior. So I personally have started my journey in futures literacy year 2017. And what really caught my attention was this idea that the future doesn't exist. And that for me, and it's as stupid as it is, because we all know that physically you cannot touch the future. But I remember the moment somebody said, the future is a concept, it doesn't exist, and therefore anything is possible. Mind blown, number one. Number two, because it doesn't exist, there are many futures that are possible. So at the same time, multiple futures coexist. And one, honestly, even just that, if you think about these words long enough, more than 30 seconds, it will change the way you think about the things you're doing right now. You give a different value to the things you're doing right now, because once you have this mindset in your mind, this concept in your mind, then literally that anything is possible comes to life. So I can give you an example. What I did for my thesis, for my master's thesis, I integrated futures literacy with intercultural dynamics. And what I did was was studying a futures literacy laboratory that was held with different people from different cultures on a specific topic that was not related to it, right? And what I studied was really the dynamic that created among the participants. And one of the things that really shocked me was I did some interviews with people, right? And there were, participants from Middle Eastern countries as well as China, so Southeast Asia, Europe. And one of the things that really clicked for me was how going through this laboratory, so going through this, let's call it workshop. If you don't, if people doesn't know what it is, it's a workshop that you go through different phases about a specific topic with a lens of the futures, let's say. One of the comments that I still remember that I received was, I never thought that, so this somebody said, kind of quoting, I can't remember exactly the words, but the point was, I cannot believe that I have created a future with somebody that's that I thought was so distant from me. And what that told me as a researcher in that moment was, if only we were able to make people understand that culture is not a barrier, culture is actually a spectrum, and that we are actually much more similar than we think, by imagining the future together and knowing that anything is possible. So that future scenario is actually possible. Maybe it's not probable, but it's possible. This will make people understand and feel more comfortable designing that future together, making it more comfortable for them to potentially live in that scenario rather than not. So, for example, I remember that the framework that I was thinking into was the European immigration crisis. One of the things that I I live in a culture that is not super open. We seem very open as Italians, but as a culture in our own country, we're not as open. And we have a lot of immigrants coming through the south of Italy. Everybody knows it's a big issue, and a lot of people are scared from that. But I remember I had a conversation with my grandmother who, was live like she lived in a different era from me, right? For her, an immigrant had a different, very different status than what it had for me. And so when I remember having this conversation with her and really understanding what was the issue that brought her to think about immigrants in a certain way, and what I realized, it really came from not knowing, the fear of not knowing. We don't know where they come from, we don't know what they do, and that anger, sometimes is anxiety, sometimes it comes from the same place. So if we're able, the point is, a person usually thinks about the future in a way that is already shaped by the past that they had. So it's really hard in the daily life of people to think about the future in a detached way from where they've been, what they've known. And an example is, I remember, the father, let's say, of futures literacy, Real Miller, he did a speech years ago, and he said something that really resonated with me, which was, if you think about a school right now, anybody in the world will have an exact image of what a school look like. So if we think about a school in the future, the first image that you get is a specific image, right? But there was a time where schools were not there. Somebody invented schools, and from one day to the other, people started going to school. So there have existed people in this world, on this planet, that did not know what a school was, meaning that change is possible. And now it's so integrated into our culture that is, absolutely impossible for us to imagine a world without education or schools, right? So this tells us already that now, if I have to think about education or school, or if I think about, training students, this kind of things, the physical image that I get in my mind, a very specific one, is the one that is the school that I've been in, I have experienced. Meaning that I am influencing the future with my past, with what I have experienced, right? So in that scenario, I cannot imagine a world where school looks like a screen, which was what COVID brought us, right? School looks like, I don't know, all in my brain. I close my eyes, I'm at school. Like these kind of things, it's much harder to actually think about them when you don't have the futures literacy skill, right? This kind of capability to reimagine and reinvent the future as you need and tap into that.
You mentioned lots of nice points, and I just wanted to let you more space to explain the things because you mentioned that, okay, we need to incorporate and bring future in our daily life,
Less.
focusing on some main ideas, which is the future. It's not exist. At the same time, there are lots of possibilities in terms of thinking about the future, and we don't know. We
Exactly.
have no idea what future holds for us. And instead of focusing on the past and using the past for thinking about the future to
Like,
predict the future, using our imagination towards future and bring or use the future to act in the present.
yes.
And it's a little bit scary because it seems when you are thinking in that way, you are disrupting the way we've lived so far, which means usually people expect to know, okay, I'm here and I want to go here and I need to plan
Mm,
for kind of transition phase,
mm,
you know? But in the way you are talking about the future literacy, it seems it's not about transition, it's about transformation,
yeah.
which means I have no idea about the future.
Yeah.
Everything is possible. And sometimes you just need to go with the flow and you need to be open to any possibilities. And you need to be as much as possible flexible, I don't know, resilient, as you mentioned, anti-fragile, and uh, agility and, being agile is really important. Every time it could be possible, you change the way you are following. I mean, it's scary for most of the people.
Absolutely. It is scary. And that's why it's a skill that you build and maintain. It's not something that one day to the other you just learn, right? But to go back to your point of how do we include this into our daily life in a way that it doesn't scare us, right? So I can give you a personal example. I'm a big planner. I love planning. It makes me feel calm, I know what I'm supposed to do that will lead me there, and this is it. However, we all know that distractions are a thing in life, and there are so many elements that you cannot control. And futures literacy is really about tapping into non-controllable kind of space and really get comfortable with it. What I think it really helps with is this concept of if you can imagine it, it's a possible scenario. It is a way to, first of all, it's a way to give yourself space in which you can play. So one of the most important things and I think in life, but especially professionally, is to know what your playground is, to know what your space is. And then what you can do in that space is up to you. But you need to have because if not, you just get lost, right? Once you have that, I think it's important to have these both the balance between the two, which again comes with building a certain skill, not just from one day to the other. But the idea of saying, like, okay, this is where I want to get. Let's say I wanna get to a certain profession, to a certain job, to a certain, milestone in life. But the point is there is no right path to get there. There's many paths in which you can get there. Futures literacy is all about getting comfortable with changing that path as you go. And at the same time, being able to see and develop an awareness of what are the emerging trends that you start seeing. And I think this can look it's quite similar from a personal standpoint and from a professional standpoint. I give you an example. I work in sustainability, which is an ever-changing kind of field, and it's a field that can look very different from day to day. If a new regulation comes in, I'm affected, and what I can do or cannot do, what I can say, I cannot say from one day to the other changes. And when you're part of an organization, it's everything feels so much bigger. So the way in which you look at these things becomes more in terms of a flow rather than in blocks. And the objective, so the goal at the end of the day doesn't change necessarily. Is how you get there. That really doesn't disrupt you personally.
Uh-huh.
So I can give you an example. When something I found very, very interesting when I was doing my thesis, I remember there was a strong intercultural focus, right? And I remember thinking about this example of when I was growing up, there was a Romanian community that was living not far away from my house. And I remember back in the day, it was considered very different and therefore very dangerous. So my mom would always tell me whenever we pass in that area, make sure that you have, first of all, hold my hand and never let go, but also be aware of what you have in your backpack, what you have in your pockets, and make sure that you touch your pockets and make sure that things are still there, stuff like this, right? So I grew up with this mentality that I had to be scared of Romanian people for some reason. And then growing up, I realized that that was not not the same. Let's say a lot of things had changed. At the same time, I realized that one of the things that futures literacy really does at a mental level, so in the way your brain works, is that we are society is teaching us to think in a certain way, but many ways. It could be society, it could be the friends group that you go out with, it can be your family, your own personality. It all shapes the way that you see and think of things, and that you put them in compartments. Usually, that's how our brain works, right? We put them in boxes. Once you're able, one of the things the Futures Literacy does, going through in a workshop, you go through different phases that help you disrupt these boxes and see things more in a flow. What that does is that exactly what I said before. Once you have an objective, let's say your objective is to get a certain position, a certain job. We all think, oh, I have to study this and then get an internship in that place, and then I will get into that job. These are the skills you need to know. This is the things you need to know. These are the skills you need to build. Maybe it used to be like that. It's not like that anymore. There's multiple ways in which you can get there. And if you unbox the way you think about this pathway, it will make it easier for you to adapt to whatever situation comes your way to get there. An example, a question I think is really relatable is travel. We all travel, right? Somehow, somewhere, even going to, the village next door. When you plan a trip, when you plan a travel, what do you do? The Usually 90% of the time, the answer is, I look at flights. And then the question is, what if flights are in there? What if there's no flights? Once you start stepping into this way of thinking of, you build this capability of thinking about using the imagination and using the future in the present to your advantage. And this kind of, uncontrollable percentage, because you don't know if flights will be there, right? It's not a forecast that we have or a plan that we have. When you start saying, "Oh, I could actually get there by train, I can get there by boat, I can get there walking, biking, whatever it is," then you're starting like, that is already a way in which you're starting to use the future within futures literacy. What happened to me is that when I got into futures literacy, I actually started looking at other aspects of future thinking. One that I am very, very geeky about, I absolutely love, is anticipation. The anticipation theory. I think it's amazing. How actually nature anticipates. So the way trees, like the leaves fall in autumn and all the like, it anticipates the next season already. And I find it super fascinating the way we take out an umbrella because we anticipate it's going to rain. And how does that in a professional environment, I think that is very interesting to apply, balancing out with this like concept of the future doesn't exist always, right? So what I would say, to fight the scary or to help yourself in your personal life, I would always what I do, and it always helps me, is when I don't know, when I start getting anxious, because as I said, I'm a big planner, I do tell myself the future doesn't exist, it's a concept. Meaning that I have the space to do what I actually want to do. So I really, and that it's not necessarily a question per se, but it's what happens when I ask myself and like tell myself these words, is that I start envisioning what maybe I really want. Or sometimes is, oh, then I don't have to do I don't have to take the plane to go home. I could actually do it in other ways. Or what this happens that allows my brain to think differently, which helps most of the times, in any focus area of my life.
Yeah, which means that kind of approach, focusing on the possibility of different future at the same time, no future, focusing on using imagination, using the future in the present, uh, help us to disrupt the way we already used to live, to work, to think, to approach to the problems, because most of the problems we can say the main problems are wicked problems. We cannot find specific solutions for them. We need to, uh, think about them, approach them in different ways. And what I found, future literacy helps me a lot to think, as you mentioned, outside the box and think about alternatives,
Uh,
not just, focusing on the specific rights, the solution that people share with me. I know if we want to continue talking about future literacy, there are lots of things and it takes time, maybe not hours, but days, weeks, and more. Maybe in the future, we'll find some more space to talk about, or I don't know, do something. Because this is one of the main area we already decided to focus more. But at least you gave us, shared with us kind of introduction related to future literacy. Last but not least,
Yeah.
maybe I missed to ask something specifically related to the things you wanted or we wanted to talk about, but I forgot, or maybe you want to stress on something which is important. That's why I want to ask you to share anything else you'd like to share with us before we finish this episode.
Great question. I think there is one thing that I see, let's say like this, one trend that I see. So throughout my life, as I share, well, my life, I'm, I mean, I'm hope I'm still pretty young, but up until now, uh, what I focused on intercultural competencies, than futures literacy and sustainability, and I see them very connected. And what this kind of brought me to think sometimes is at this concept of what are the skills that somebody needs to have to live in the world of today. And I I a few years ago I started calling it with myself global citizenship. Like what are the skills of global citizenship? And I am nowhere near actually diving deep into that because I'm choosing a different path at the moment, but um, I do think it's a very important thing to not just focus on one specific thing. Just really kind of in the kind of continuing our conversation on the flow. It is a flow, it is a spectrum. And all of these skills are very important sing like by themselves together. So I would really encourage anybody who wants to get a bit more into futures thinking or live a bit more sustainably or move abroad or live or does live abroad to really think about all these multiple things together. Because there's so many aspects of each one of these three, let's say, categories that makes it so much easier in the other. Yeah, so this is the only thing that I wanted to add and say, I think it's a very interesting interconnection that I want to dive deeper into. I want to take time to do that, but if anybody's interested in, feel free to contact me.
Fabulous. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you a lot. I appreciate your time and thank you for sharing your experience and your advice as well. That was helpful and inspiring. I enjoyed a lot and hope to see you or talk to you soon or late about more stuff, specifically about future literacy, and wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Same to you. It was a great conversation. So thanks for your time.
So we will publish this episode very soon, hopefully by the end of this year. Episode 7, yeah, and it's available on different platforms, Spotify, Castbox, Apple Podcasts, and also we are trying to share some main points of this conversation on our social media channels. And as I said, we will add your LinkedIn profile link in the description. If somebody wants to approach you, it's simple and easy, I think, to find your LinkedIn and you are of course approachable and I think yeah they can approach you, ask the questions related to our conversation.
Thank you so much. Have an amazing rest of the beginning of the new year and good luck with everything that you're doing.